focus for this panel discussion is on South Asia, and I welcome the opportunity to share with you the work my office has been carrying out, especially in that part of the world, to prevent genocide and other atrocity crimes. So this discussion is also very timely, as this year, on the 9th of December, we will commemorate the 75th anniversary of the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, which has been in existence since 1948. So far, this is a convention that has been ratified by 153 states, with the Republic of Zambia being the latest. They ratified last year in July. And the Genocide Convention has been guiding nations all over the world to prevent the heinous crime that aims to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnic, or racial or religious group, and to punish its perpetrators when prevention fails. Many countries have domesticated the Genocide Convention, and on this important year, we acknowledge the leadership of many nations that have passed national laws to ensure the efficacy of the convention and are implementing actions to honor its principles, such as the establishment of national committees for genocide prevention. Many other nations, however, still have not signed or ratified the Genocide Convention. Asia is the second continent with the highest number of countries, that is 15, who are yet to sign, accede, or to ratify the convention. And the countries that haven't signed, acceded, or ratified the convention in Asia are Bhutan, Brunei Darussalam, Indonesia, Japan, Kiribati, Marshall Islands, Micronesia, Nauru, Palau, Samoa, Solomon Islands, Thailand, Timor-Leste, Tuvalu, and Vanuatu. So I continue to advocate in bilateral, regional, and multilateral meetings for the universal ratification of this important legal document as a necessary aspect of genocide prevention that reaffirms the sovereign responsibility of every nation towards its population, whatever the race, ethnicity, nationality, or religion of the people. The world has witnessed the consequence of failing to prevent genocide and other atrocity crimes. The wounds left by the Holocaust, as well as the genocides in Rwanda in 1994 and Srebrenica in 1995, are yet to be healed. And my office was established in 2004 as an acknowledgement that the international community had indeed failed to prevent past instances of genocide. But most importantly, this office was established as a commitment to prevent future genocides and other atrocity crimes. So my office acts as an early warning mechanism to the Secretary General and through him to the Security Council to bring to their attention situations that could result in genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. A team of analysts monitors all regions of the world, guided by the framework of analysis for atrocity crimes, which is this document that's developed by my office. And this framework that I just raised up supports the assessment of the risk factors for genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. Risk factors are the conditions that increase the susceptibility to human rights violations and eventually to atrocity crimes. Unfortunately, no country is free from the risk factors of atrocity crimes. Situations that degenerate into a genocide are often the ones that ignore the warning signs of mounting tensions, intolerance, discrimination, polarization, and violence. Genocide and atrocity crimes do not occur spontaneously. Perpetrators need time to plan, develop capacities, mobilize resources, and take action. And my office brings to the attention of the decision makers of the multilateral system these warning signs. Aside from the analytical work, my office is also mandated to build the capacity of government, civil society, and UN entities on atrocity prevention. Partnerships with various stakeholders, including religious and traditional leaders, secular and religious civil society organizations, government officials, new and traditional media, allow us to advance prevention. Regarding religious leaders, in 2017, in partnership with the Kingdom of Morocco, my office launched the Plan of Action for Religious Leaders and Actors to prevent incitement to violence that could lead to atrocity crimes, also called the Phase Plan of Action. This plan consists of a set of options and tools for actions that religious leaders and actors can take to prevent and counter incitement to violence where there are risks of atrocity crimes. Actions include engaging in dialogue with those that express radical views, supporting interreligious and intercultural discussions, promoting education, and upholding activities that promote cultural diversity, respect for diversity, and country of hate speech. The first plan of action is available in my office's website and in all the UN official languages. And I echo the call of the United Nations Secretary General that its dissemination should be spread out as widely as possible, and it should be implemented as widely as possible to help save lives, reduce suffering, and make a reality of the mission of respect for diversity and peace. The office's website also makes available the policies we produce to foster atrocity prevention globally. Recent policy papers have tackled combating Holocaust and genocide denial, addressing hate speech through education, and the role of sports in countering hate speech. And just next week on Monday, we are launching another plan of action, this one for women on countering and addressing hate speech and preventing incitement to violence that will lead to atrocity crimes. So countering hate speech is an important aspect of our work. Since 2019, my office has been the focal point of the United Nations strategy and plan of action on hate speech, and in this capacity has been supporting United Nations field entities to develop context-specific action plans on countering and addressing hate speech, which is understood. The working definition of hate speech in the UN strategy is any kind of communication in speech, writing, or behavior that attacks or uses pejorative or discriminatory language with reference to a person or a group on the basis of their religion, ethnicity, nationality, race, color, gender, or other identity factor. The office also supports member states upon request in developing the capacities to address and counter hate speech in line with international human rights law and standards, and the right to freedom of opinion and expression in particular. By addressing hate speech, we contribute societies based on inclusiveness and respect for the human rights of all people without discrimination. Escalation of tensions that could spill over into violence may also be avoided. Leaders, including political, religious, and community leaders, should use their voice to reject hate speech and promote inclusion, respect for diversity, and peaceful coexistence. In tackling hate speech, it is especially important to hear the voices of the victims, as well as those who are most marginalized and vulnerable, including ethnic and religious minorities. Education has also been vital in our efforts to prevent atrocity crimes and their incitement globally. It's been recognized across the UN system as a powerful tool to promote pluralism, inclusion, respect for diversity, and mitigation of long-term risk factors such as discrimination, prejudice, and dehumanization of groups based on their identity. Through comprehensive teaching methods, students can have a better understanding of past atrocity crimes, including the underlying causes, dynamics, and processes that have led to them. Education equips the new generations with the knowledge, critical thinking skills, and tools to reflect on their society, identify early signs of atrocity crimes, and act against the warning signs. In Southeast Asia in particular, my office has for the past 2 years implemented an initiative to strengthen educational responses to atrocity prevention in the region. As part of this initiative, my office partnered with the Documentation Center of Cambodia, DCCAM, to develop a teacher's guidebook and provide training to teachers from the region, building on the experience and good practices of Cambodia in integrating atrocity prevention in their educational system. At the university level, we supported the development of a course curriculum on atrocity prevention for undergraduate students in partnership with the Asia Pacific Center for the Responsibility to Protect, the University of Gajah Mada in Indonesia, and the University of Chulalongkorn in Thailand. The teacher's manual and the university curriculum provides an opportunity to raise awareness among students of the risk factors of atrocity crimes and to learn how past instances of atrocity crimes, from past instances of atrocity crimes, how these crimes can be prevented. So since I took office as Undersecretary General, I have visited Asia, and I would like to mention specifically a visit I made to Bangladesh, and I traveled with the refugee camps in Cox's Bazar to engage with and bring attention to the continued dire situation of the Rohingya and the need for action. And as I noted at the end of my mission, the Rohingya continue to be one of the most vulnerable communities in the world. They've suffered decades of discrimination, dehumanization, deprivation of their identity and basic rights, including to citizenship in Myanmar. And I push consistently for accountability for the extreme violence witnessed in 2017 against the Rohingya, in which they were killed, tortured, raped, burnt alive and humiliated on no other basis than their identity. So the need for justice and our collective action remains as urgent as ever before. I also continue to raise alarm over increasing negative rhetoric against the refugees and that is reported across the region. The international community needs to do more to ensure that the Rohingya are not forgotten and that the conditions that led to them fleeing are addressed. Returns should only happen when they are voluntary, safe and sustainable, and in this regard, host communities also need to be supported until returns are possible. The Rohingya have already suffered some of the worst violations and atrocities imaginable, and we cannot fail them again. Unfortunately, division, hate and discrimination based on identity, including religious identity, continues to be a challenge globally and in the region. Asia is a region rich in religious and ethnic diversity and with a well-known history of promotion of the principles of respect, non-discrimination and equality. South Asia has strong nations that, alongside faith-based organizations and civil societies, carry out work to nurture the traditions of respect for diversity and to strengthen the foundations for peace. However, as we meet today, I continue remaining very concerned with the increase in rhetoric of exclusion, intolerance and hate that is reported in the region, often at the expense of the most vulnerable group, such as religious minorities. Such trends have been reported in Sri Lanka, in India, in Pakistan, Afghanistan, Myanmar and Bangladesh. In some instances, this has been accompanied by physical attacks. In Afghanistan, for example, I remain concerned about the situation of ethnic and religious minorities, the Shia Hazara in particular. Throughout the last few years, there have been several attacks against this community, targeting their places of worship, schools and communities. The Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in Afghanistan has noted in his reports from 2022 and 2023 that this type of attacks, often claimed by ISIL-KP, seems to be widespread and systematic and bear the hallmark of international crimes. And I echo this concern. So, ladies and gentlemen, as I mentioned earlier, no country is free from the risk factors for atrocity crimes. When those risks exist alongside the persecution of minority groups based on religious, ethnic, national, or racial identity, the situation, if unaddressed, can escalate into a genocide or other atrocity crimes. Threats to freedom of religion or belief, as religious intolerance and incapacity to accept diversity, challenge the very foundation of international peace and security, as well as the respect of fundamental human rights. The first human rights documents adopted in 1948, that is the Genocide Convention and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, demand protection of the freedom of religion and belief of racial, ethnic, national, and religious groups. The principles and norms of these human rights documents are as relevant today as they were in 1948. And I recall the responsibility of countries, civil societies, religious and traditional leaders, and every single citizen to make freedom of religion and belief the norm and precondition for the respect of the dignity of all human beings based on the principle of non-discrimination. While states have the primary responsibility to protect populations from atrocity crimes, other actors in society, including religious and traditional leaders and actors, play a very important role in preventing and mitigating their risk factors. Indeed, prevention is most effective when it is anchored in and implemented by local communities that at times can recognize early warning signs of atrocity crimes better and even before any other actor. My office has been closely engaging with religious and traditional leaders and actors for the prevention of atrocity crimes and to develop the first plan of action that I mentioned earlier. My office organized a consultation with religious leaders in South and Southeast Asia to generate good practices and recommendations related to the implementation of the plan of action in the region. The latest such initiatives were in June and December 2021, one with the regional focus and the other focus on the situation in India. Religious and traditional leaders in South Asia exert great influence in their communities, and we count on them to maintain their commitment to peace, respect for diversity and non-discrimination in the pursuit of a region free of atrocity crimes. So as I continue leading the United Nations efforts to prevent genocide and other atrocity crimes, I count and ask for the leadership of the United States and of this distinguished Congress to join forces with my office to counter hate speech and religious intolerance in South Asia and ensure that no racial, ethnic, national, or religious group is at risk of atrocity crimes in this region and beyond. This was the vision that fueled the actions of Raphael Lemkin, the man behind the Genocide Convention, and also the man who gave us the name genocide, and 75 years from the historical moment of the Convention's adoption. I would ask that we renew our commitment to its principles. Thank you very much, and once again, deeply apologize for not being with you in person as planned. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Dr. Iqtidar Chima, who has joined us from the United Kingdom. He is a member of the United Nations Global Steering Committee for the Office of Prevention of Genocide and Atrocities. He's also director of the Institute for Leadership and Community Development in Birmingham, UK, and is a fellow at the Edward Cadbury Centre of the University of Birmingham in the United Kingdom. Dr. Chima studied philosophy at Oxford and earned his PhD in international relations at the University of Gloucestershire, and in addition, a Master of Business Administration from the University of Sunderland. His postdoctoral project was entitled Constitutional and Legal Challenges Faced by Minorities in India, and this was published by the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom in 2017. Dr. Chima has previously testified many times at congressional hearings and briefings related to human rights and international religious freedom. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Chima.
Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and our dear friend Lawrence. It's always a great opportunity to come here and brief the congressional staff and the members of the Congress as well as of the Congress. I'm very delighted that we are joined by, obviously, first of all, Under Secretary General herself. She was supposed to be here in person, as she explained why she couldn't make it today. But I think Nadine Mianza, for me, is most important more than anyone else, because she was the chair of the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom, and now she is the president of International Religious Freedom Secretariat. She has been a very strong voice about people's right to self-determination, which I must compliment her for, and also in her role as the chair of the USERF, she has raised a lot of concerns about the religious minorities, and as we are human rights defender, we know how complicated it is to talk about the unrepresented people of unrepresented nations, because the commercial rights always come first, and the people who can't afford to lobby and pay people to lobby for them, voicing for them is difficult in international structure. So it's a wonderful opportunity once more. I have a PowerPoint presentation, so you will follow some slides from there. So first slide. So yesterday when I was talking to Congressman John Garamendi, he said, what is majoritarianism? It is something you have coined. So let's explain what majoritarianism first. So to define it very briefly, it is a political philosophy or agenda which asserts that a majority based on religion, language, or social class, or some other identifying factor of population is entitled to a certain degree of primacy in society and has the right to make decisions not affect the state and society, that the state should be governed by that majority. That's what we call majoritarianism. Now, impacts are social, political, religious, and of the governance. But for me to briefly and precisely explain, I think I have borrowed this from Professor Sartori, who is a famous Italian political scientist. He defined majoritarianism in such a beautiful way that establishing an absolute right of majority to impose its will on minorities amounts to establishing a working rule that works in long run against the very principle of democracy. In majority acquires absolute power, the democracy has no democratic future and ceases to be a democracy. I think this is very well elaborated definition about the impact of majoritarianism. First slide. So what I will be covering today is actually three countries: Pakistan, China, and India. These are the three countries which have been country of particular concern for religious freedom, which obviously constitute major part of majoritarianism, snubbing the religious freedom in these countries. USERF, whom Nadine has chaired and for whom she has been commissioner, has 3 consecutive years declared these countries as country of particular concern for religious freedom. So, first I would go to Pakistan, which is country of my origin, where I was born. So let's go to Pakistan, about the majoritarianism. By the way, Pakistan is a country which came into being on the name of majoritarianism. Country has those roots where in 1947 it was created a country based on Muslim majority. So the pluralism was lost just based on this country's creation. And then obviously it has a founder who on 11th of August 1947 given a very idea of inclusion. But over the years that inclusion has been lost. There's a lot we can say, but I'm going to cover, when it comes to Pakistan and majoritarianism impact, 3 particular issues. One is abduction of minority community females, forced marriages and conversion. This is one of the major issues in Pakistan at the moment. The females, specifically from the Hindu community in Sindh, are being abducted by the people, forcefully converted to Islam. And this matter is ongoing for years. Mind you, Pakistan has a very sizable Hindu community, not a small community, it's in millions. And the province of Sindh in Pakistan has passed a piece of legislation to control this issue, where they are making it mandatory that anybody under the age of 18 from any community cannot be married. But the grassroots problem is this. The people who are abducting Hindu females, or in some instances even the Sikh females from the minority communities, they are bringing them to Punjab province, where there is a different set of legislation where you can register their marriage. And when police investigated, these women are being coerced to say that it was with the consent, and they converted to faith with the consent. But this is one of the major issues which minority community, the Hindu community, is facing in Pakistan at the moment. Then the most recent development in 2021 was the single national curriculum and lack of inclusivity. So in 2021, August, the then Prime Minister, Imran Khan, officially launched the controversial single national curriculum for primary schools and religious seminaries. One of the aspects of the curriculum is that the Quran, which is obviously majority book, majority of Pakistanis are Muslim, but Quran is not the book for the minorities of that country. But every child up to the age of 10, starting from the primary school, is supposed to be reading Quran, which is against the religious freedom, and it's being put on to the people to do that. And obviously, this single national curriculum has been criticized. Another thing which you will find in the single national curriculum, Pakistan is a country to so many other religious communities like Hindus, Sikhs, Buddhists, and the Christians. But in the national curriculum, what you find, all the heroic figures are just the Muslims. So in the school, if you are from a minority community, you wouldn't find our role model to follow. So that single national curriculum lacks inclusivity, has been criticized, but it's been implemented. And this has also been criticized by the National Commission for Human Rights in Pakistan. The real hate speech we were talking about is arising from this national curriculum, where a young little child would think his classmate who is non-Muslim is an infidel. So Nadine knows the issues we face in the world when it comes to takfir or kufr and people being assassinated based on that. So that infidel concept is very troublesome for the ethnic or religious minorities in Pakistan. The third aspect is violence against sectarian, ethnic, and linguistic minorities. So when we talk about the persecution of minorities, we always think this is one religion against another religion. But what we don't appreciate sometimes, within any religion, there are different religious denominations. So Muslims are Muslims, but they have Shia, Sunni, Barelvi, Deobandi, and so many sects. Pakistan currently is a Sunni dominant country where you would find a lot of persecution of the Shia Muslims. And of the Ahmadiyya community. All the Ahmadiyya are recognized or the Qadianis are recognized as a separate religious entity in Pakistan. Against the Shia community is increasing. And Hazara community in Pakistan was attacked by ISIS in 2021. Hazaras are Shia Muslims based in Balochistan. And ISIS took the responsibility that we have, there was an attack on the Hazara community. Hazara community protested against it, but the then Prime Minister of Pakistan, Imran Khan, was asked to engage with the issue. He said, I would not engage with the blackmailers. Instead of dealing with this atrocity crime against a religious minority, Hazara community, he said they were blackmailers and he didn't engage. So all these trends of a majority Muslim community trying to snub the religious minorities in Pakistan is not helpful. Hence, Pakistan is also a country of particular concern for religious freedom for the last 3 years. Now, I move to another country which is very significant, that is China. So we will now move to situation in China. China is obviously a country of particular concern for the last many years for religious freedom and human rights conditions, and also have been recommended as a country of particular concern by USER for 3 consecutive years. Now, when we go to China, it's not the religious ideology which is a problem in China at the moment. It's actually communist majoritarianism in China, which is impacting the religious freedom situations there. So first thing is obviously no religion policy, because I think the Communist Republic of China has adopted this policy where they equates religion with violence and terrorism. So it is strange. I mean, the next door Muslim country, Pakistan, support China all the time, but we would find that China has this book Quran, which is Muslims' book, in the Museum of Terrorism as a book of terrorism. And many of the Muslims are not allowed to call for prayers in the mosques, and the kids till the age of 18, they cannot attend a religious institution. And obviously we are aware of the Uyghur Muslims and their situation in China, the forced marriages, forced conversions, and like the Nazi camp, China has established camps for the Uyghur Muslims there. And same is the situation with the Christian community. The Christian persecution in China continues. So they have 3 ratification and 1 demolition policy, where a lot of churches are actually being demolished in China, and a lot of bishops and others. The Chinese government is interfering with their appointment, and they have been put behind the bars for years. And also the Buddhists. So similar situation with the Tibetan Buddhist community. And Chinese government have issues with the Dalai Lama for years, but the Tibetan Buddhists are being persecuted there. Although they do recognize some form of Buddhism in China, but a big population of the Buddhists are being persecuted. One of the things I wanted to flag up, Congressman, with you is this, and for the staffers here, that a lot of former US officials and former members of Congress actually have been hired by the Chinese government to lobby for China. And they are doing their best that all those religious freedom and human rights issues should be brushed under the carpet. I think that needs to be curtailed in these houses, and I'm aware that a lot of congressmen we work with through the Sikh caucus are very concerned about the transnational repression, and China is one of the core countries of transnational repression. I now want to move to India after Pakistan and China. India is one of the, and you would be amazed to know now that India is now the largest population of the world. It was China in the past, but now India is the largest populated country in the world, very, very ethnically diverse, but it has a lot of issues. It is again a country of particular concern by USER for the last 3 consecutive years. One of the demands, which is very upsetting recently, India was supposed to be a secular country, but now with the ultranationalist government of BJP, they are asking India to be a Hindu Rashtra or a Hindu country, which is just a country for Hindus. And obviously, it arises from the ideology of Hindutva. If you look at my slide, actually, I have put a text by Damodar Savarkar book Hindutva, which describe what Hindutva means. It means anybody, any religions which have originated from India, like Sikhism, Buddhism, they should come back to Hinduism or they have no place. And the religions like Islam, Judaism, Christianity, Hindutva believes that these are the foreign religions. They should, India is not their holy land, so they should either convert to Hinduism or they go back to the countries where they have the holy land. So they are proposing that all the Christians should go back to Vatican and all the Muslims should go back to Mecca. That's not going to be possible in 21st century. We are in a globalized world, and having such an ideology is very, very counterproductive. And India has been using the Unlawful Prevention Act against, and the sedition laws against the religious minorities consistently. If you voice for religious freedom or human rights, there is a sedition case against you. You are tagged as a terrorist. You are put behind the bars, and the courts are not doing anything about it. And they are trying to assimilate all these people rather to engage with some of the core issues raised by the USARF over the years. Indian government has adopted this policy that they will snub these voices. By the way, Nadine would also know that India is the only country where even she couldn't have gone. She wouldn't be allowed an entry to India, despite of the fact she was the chair of the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom, because none of the USARF commissioners or the staff has ever been allowed to visit India to monitor the religious freedom situation there. And another thing is the CAA, Citizenship Amendment Act, and NRC, National Register for the Citizens, which is very much focused on disenfranchise the Muslim population. So if you are a Muslim, the government of India is proposing you have to register on a national register. You have to prove that you are a legitimate citizen. No one else has to. Even if you are born in India, if your 4 or 5 generations are from India, because you are a Muslim, you have to prove that you are Indian. So what we are looking, ladies and gentlemen, in the future, if this NRC is implemented, a lot of stateless minorities. We already have the issue of statelessness in the South Asian region, where you have highest population of Uyghurs. But if Government of India aggressively implement National Register for Citizenship and the CAA and disenfranchise Muslim population, you will have a lot of issue of people who have no citizenship of any country. And obviously, I also want to talk about the caste system. There are still a huge Dalit community which is classified by the majority Indian population as untouchable. We talked about in these houses about slavery and all of that, but what world probably don't know, that you have one of the largest country in the world where people are still considered to be untouchable, who have no access even to go for an election. A country where an animal, cow, is so sacred that you could be killed if you consume beef or touch a cow. But there are people who are still untouchable today. Because we have a large Sikh community here today, I want to deal with next slide, please. So, the Sikh genocide, which is now due to the help of the U.S. congressmen and everyone else, and assemblymen, has been recognized by 4 state assemblies here in the U.S. as genocide. Sikh genocide, because we are in the month of June. It started in the month of June. The then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi planned it in 1983, well before 1984, attack on the Golden Temple. So imagine, Nadine, if somebody attacks the Vatican and raze it to the ground, how the Christians would feel. Or the Church of England is razed to the ground and many Christians are persecuted. Or for Muslims, if Mecca or Kaaba is attacked by the tanks and by an army of the country, and the whole of the Kaaba or Mecca has brought down. So that was exactly the situation with the Sikhs, my friends, when the Golden Temple or Darbar Sahib was attacked by the Indian army with the tanks. And it continued in 1984 November, and for the whole decade. One of the things we forget, the Sikh genocide wasn't for 3 months or just not for November. It started in 1984, lasted for whole decade till 1995. I must commend that due to the efforts of the American Sikh Caucus at the assemblies and here in the houses, it is getting wider recognition. 4 of the state assemblies in the US has recognized the Sikh Caucus, and we will continue to work with the members of Congress and with the assemblymen to get it recognized widely. So thank you very much for that. I know Congressman Costa is here. I don't want to stop him to come to the podium, I will now straight away go to my recommendation to the members of Congress as well as, and I would request all the people attending from the State Department and from the staff attending from their congressmen, please do take these recommendations to your congressman. So my first recommendation would be that the United States should put religious freedom and human rights at the heart of all trade, aid, and diplomatic relations with any countries. And may I request the members of Congress that Prime Minister Modi of India he will be visiting this house very soon to address here. May I request you that please do raise these human rights and religious freedom violations in India with Prime Minister Modi during his visit. Congressman Costa, during the previous visit, I remember, signed a letter which was signed by another 36 members of Congress raising the religious freedom concerns, and that really helped. When Prime Minister Modi was here, 36 congressmen gave him this letter, and when he went back, he made a public statement that the Hindutva forces need to stop, and it is obviously deteriorating the situation there. So please do the same this year. The second recommendation will be the United States should effectively deal with transnational repression and lobbying for the United States, lobbyists for the United States which violates human rights and religious freedom should be made unlawful. As I was talking about the religious freedom situation in China, a lot of people being paid, they are ex-congressmen, some people who worked for the State Department in the past. That transnational repression should be curbed. Funds for American citizens and support the hate campaign abroad should be banned from operating from the United States. So we have seen, in the countries like India, where the civic voices of minority communities is being snubbed by the laws against the charities and the crackdown. Even organizations like Greenpeace are banned now, and many of the Christian organizations. But on the other hand, this country doesn't have the laws which snub all these organizations who are working for the interests of these countries, and they are raising a lot of money from the US, from the US citizen, and sending it abroad to persecute the minorities. That need to be monitored very thoroughly in the United States. My third recommendation would be that the US Congress and UN should recognize Sikh genocide 1984-1995 as already recognized through resolution by State Senate of New Jersey, State Assemblies of State of California, Pennsylvania, and Texas. Fourth recommendation is obviously UN, which I have already sent the draft of my presentation to UN Secretary General and the Secretary General's office, that UN should help the training of legislators and policymakers of the countries of particular concern for inclusion. So you don't have to be very intrusive. One of the things which congressional staff can do, or the departments here, bring some of these people from these countries who are the country of particular concern. Maybe they don't understand the world in 21st century. Maybe they are not engaging constructively with the religious freedom ideas or human rights ideas. Maybe they would learn from you or from United States that how you manage inclusion, how you become open to everybody, how you promote racial equality, how you believe and work, the policymakers work on the human dignity. The fifth one will be the United States and UN should instruct its consulates and missions to examine the condition of religious freedom for all faiths, beliefs, and meet with individuals and organizations that promote religious freedom and relate human rights, as well as targeted religious communities. The sixth one is for UN exclusively. As you have heard under Secretary General before me, that there are quite a few states who have not ratified the UN conventions. So when it comes to the state of India, I have done this mapping exercise in the UN structure that UN should encourage India to sign 1977 Additional Protocol of Convention 1948 withdraw its reservation from the Genocide Convention 1948. So India is one of the states who has submitted reservation against the Genocide Convention. It has adopted Genocide Convention, but they would not recognize the Genocide Convention. So we have been pushing in the UN structure that India should ratify it completely. An International Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination 1965, International Convention on Civil and Political Rights 1966, International Convention on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights 1966, and other convents displayed on the slide. So this is what we would expect from these houses. I thank you all for your patience listening, and specifically to Congressman Jim Costa.
As we've already heard, we have the Honorable Jim Costa, member of the Congressional delegation of the state of California, representing the San Joaquin Valley, comes from a distinguished family tradition of family farming, 3 generations, and has been a member of the House of Representatives since 2005. Please join me in welcoming the Honorable Jim Costa.
Good afternoon. I am pleased to see not only so many of our Sikh brethren here, but also staff members who work with my colleagues that are a part of the Indian Congressional Caucus and other member staff, because I think this is an important gathering to really examine what's going on in South Asia. We, as Americans, believe that religious freedom is essential to a democratic society. Yet we have some nations in South Asia that pretend to be democratic nations, but are breaking the various values of those freedoms of religion. And I might say other human rights as well. That was, I think, well documented by our previous speaker. I represent a wonderful part of California, the center of the state, the San Joaquin Valley. And the challenges we have, like other parts of our country, to be sure, social, economic challenges. But the richness of the valley, I think, is inherited in the diversity of the communities that have come there for generations, from Europe, from Asia, from South America, from Africa. And I think that's, for me, the honor and the privilege to represent such a melting pot of communities from all over the world. But many who have come there, as in other parts of the country, escaped persecution from where they came from. And I think it's important to highlight that, sadly, a lot of that persecution are from people who came from Asia and South Asian countries that have witnessed and experienced religious extremism that has resulted in violations that go on today in ways that I think is important that we take note of. In our country, we almost take for granted, we should not, the freedoms that are guaranteed in our Bill of Rights. January 6th, 2021, I was one of some 30 members trapped in the gallery of the House of Representatives for 4 days as a mob of insurrectionists attempted to overthrow a fair and free election. We looked like a third world country. And I thought to myself, for 245 years of our history plus, and I'm a student of American and world history. I love history. I think we need to remember our history. But I think for 245 years we've been a beacon of light. And we've been able to be resilient through difficult times. Of course, in good times, it's easy to be resilient, but in between good and bad and difficult times, wars and depressions and recessions and the like, and even our own civil war and our own efforts to deal with slavery and bigotry and racism in our own country, we have been resilient. That day, when I was trapped upstairs for 40 minutes, I thought, as resilient as we have been, how fragile democracies can be. And so when we talk about Asia, and we talk about South Asia, and we think of, and we have so many wonderful Indian Americans, many from the region of Punjab, and we like to say, well, America is the oldest democracy in the world, the beacon of light, and India is the largest democracy in the world. But it's important when we look at what's occurring in India today, that the health of that democracy should concern us also. The anti-Sikh violence, as indicated, well, a point in 1984 continued for years. Joe Hall and Singh Kalra brought to light the horrific crimes and human rights violations through research and investigation efforts that in many cases the Indian government tried to quash. I was on a foreign relations trip to India some 10 years ago. I went to the Golden Temple. I saw the destruction that had taken place at the Golden Temple. And as our previous speaker indicated, it would be like attacking the Vatican. My faith is of Catholicism, or Mecca. And to allow that to occur and not to acknowledge it is a black mark in Indian history. Let's be clear. The politics of hate in the world and in Asia continue to raise significant concerns, even in our country. And so we must talk about the religious and the future of religious freedoms as we try to strengthen our democracies here and around the world. The world changes very rapidly. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has made fundamental changes in less than 2 years that we could not have thought about previously. I mean, Finland and Sweden becoming a part of NATO, unthinkable 2 years ago. NATO solidifying, focusing on the human rights that Ukrainians are bravely trying to protect their own country and sovereignty. And we are clear about this. Ukraine has had their own problems with corruption, as in other parts of the world. But when they are faced with a choice, they want to protect their sovereignty, and they want to join the European Union because they want to improve their country, and they want to have human rights protected. The State Department in 2022 International Religious Freedom Report highlights occurrences of continued targeted attacks in religious communities. And the attacks must be condemned by our country and by countries throughout the world. And so I signed that letter with many of my colleagues because it's the right thing to do. And when Prime Minister Modi comes here next week, we must remind him that we expect India to accord itself as a democracy that guarantees religious freedoms. It's a very diverse country. We know it's as diverse as our country. The largest Muslim population in the world is within India. But I fear that India, like other Asian countries, is backsliding. It's backsliding. I mean, you think about it, How many years was it ago that India had its first Sikh Prime Minister? However, things have not gotten better. So, as a member of the Congressional American Sikh Caucus, I think we share these concerns, and will continue to stand up for freedom of religion, especially in democracies, and that we protect these common shared values of human rights. Human rights. I want to thank the United Nations Undersecretary, Alice Drite, and Dr. Jamal, as members of the United Nations Global Steering Committee, for joining us, as well as the American Sikh Caucus for coordinating the dialogue. This is important. I know you've come from all around and you think, gee, I want to go to Washington. Trust me, I understand. I feel that way every week. No, I am honored and privileged every week to come here. I have a long commute in California. It's 12 hours a week, it's time, so it's to come to work and to go home. But I do that because I have the honor and the privilege to represent so many wonderful people. The diversity in this room is in my district. I am proud and honored by that. So let us remember that the common bonds that we share as Americans, regardless of where we came from, and part of those values and those bonds are religious freedoms, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, rights that are enshrined in our Constitution and our Bill of Rights. And so hate has no place in our society. Bottom line, it has no place in our society. We know that the politics of fear and there's the politics of hope. And both work. Both work. And that's why coming together with leadership like this, with Congressman David Valadao, who shares a rich, diverse congressional district, as do I, and Congressman Garamendi, our co-chairs of our American Sikh Caucus, and others who are part of this. But it's a much broader reach. And my friend and I, David, work together in so many things. But his leadership and Sean's leadership is critical toward this conversation, this dialogue today, and I want to thank them for their leadership and their co-chairman. Let's give them a round of applause. How do you root out hate and extremism? With love and a focus to ensure that we protect our basic human rights. And among those rights are the freedom of religion. Thank you. Thank you very much.
That was very inspiring.
Thank you.
I'm now very pleased to introduce the co-chair of the Sikh Congressional Caucus, the Honorable David Valadao. Representative Valadao represents the 22nd District of California. He's been a member of the House since 2013. He's from a distinguished farming family that has had a long presence in California and makes Hanford his home. He's also a member of the House Appropriations Committee. Please join me in welcoming the Honorable David.
David, could you take one moment, please? I've got to introduce someone early. Noble was an intern in my office. And I only say this because both David and I had internships from universities, and it's important that, I know David and I feel the same way, that we have diversity in our district. We give those young university students the opportunity to participate and to work in our offices and learn. Because guess what? They're going to be the future. They're the future leaders. And so I wanted to introduce you to them.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Apologize for being a little bit late. I don't know if you know, we've had some scheduling issues here in the Capitol these past few days. And so we're trying to get some of those addressed. First, my name is David Valadeo. I'm one of the co-chairs of the caucus, and it's been an honor in my life to be able to play a role in this. Founding this, I still remember having the conversation one day in a coffee shop in California with a couple of our colleagues that are in here now about creating this. And I thought it was important for us to do this because it was obviously an issue for a lot of my constituents, but a lot of people across the country. And as the caucus continued to be successful, it was because of a lot of folks out there working hard on this issue alongside of my staff, but my colleagues here in Congress. It's something I take a lot of pride in, and it's always interesting because we created this caucus mainly focused on issues here in the United States, and I know there's a lot of issues going on across the world that impact Sikhs, but also all nationalities. But it was something that was important for us to get involved in. But again, we continue to try to focus as much as we possibly can with just racial discrimination and violence against the Sikh community here in the U.S. It's important for us to do these things because one of the things that I'm most proud of about this country is, I mean, my family immigrated here, was mentioned. My mom and dad came to this country, and my dad came first in '69. My mom followed just a year or two later. They got married in L.A. But one of the coolest things about this country is the fact that we all come from all over different parts of the country. We've got different parts of the world. We've got different backgrounds. And we come here and we share our cultures. We share our faiths. We share our different parts of where we come from. And we put it all in one country, and we get to learn so much. But getting to a point where we respect one another and treat each other the way we should, sometimes that's a little bit harder. And sadly, we have to write laws or we have to implement policies to protect groups out there. And not that I necessarily think we have to, but we do. And we've been involved and we're happy to do that. And as we continue to look for more opportunities to be helpful, to give everyone the same opportunities in this country, the same reason my family came in this country, the ability to be successful, the ability to feed your families, the ability to give them a better opportunity. And that's essentially why we're all here. That's why we do what we do. And we're lucky to be able to do it. And I know I should have been here earlier, but the main point today was just talk about why we did this, why we started it, and why we still have some more work to do. And I'm usually a pretty quick speaker, so I don't know what's happening. I'm not very long-winded. I guess I haven't mastered this politician thing just yet. But I appreciate everyone taking the time. It's nice to see all of you here. I was really hoping there'd be food here, but apparently I missed that. That's really the only reason why I did all of this. But it is something that I'm very proud of and something I'll always be proud of. Now my next goal, which I know I've been invited many times, but I need to actually go to India. I haven't done that yet. But we'll make that happen. But have the opportunity to work with the community has been an absolute honor. I look forward to continuing that. And anything we can be helpful on, we'll continue to do what we need to do. So appreciate you all being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman Valadeo. We'd also particularly like to thank the help that we've had from Olivia from your staff when it came to organizing things possible today. So, our final speaker is Nadine Menza, the president of the International Religious Freedom Secretariat. She's previously served as a commissioner and the chair of the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom. She has a distinguished record as a defender of global religious freedom and is also particularly with respect to the Yazidi community, and she's a global fellow at the Wilson Center. Please join me in welcoming Ms.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate it. And thanks to the American Sikh Caucus Committee for inviting me, and of course Dr. Chima, and honored to be with these panelists, and so thankful, especially the members of Congress and the staff that are coming here today for making this a priority. There's a lot of demands for your time, and the fact that you're here, means a lot to us as well. You can change the next slide. I'm going to go fast here. I was fortunate, as you heard, to serve as chair of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom in sort of 2 terms. Next. We're going to move fast. And as you heard, I'm currently the president of the Arab Secretariat. And while at USERF, I learned the importance of civil society, being on government where I could actually see places that were seeing improvement, and it was doing the kind of work we do at our Secretariat. Is working to build infrastructure to support the religious freedom movement globally. We convene our roundtable in Washington, D.C. and in over 40 countries. And this isn't interfaith dialogue. This is a place where we bring together civil society, religious communities, business, government, where we solve problems and coordinate multi-faith actions. We also host a series of global summits and are launching regional secretariats around the world to better organize the work. We have a working group on India and South Asia and are working on an ambitious initiative for the region. So on May 15th, I was honored to be able to join the Secretary of State as well as the Ambassador for International Religious Freedom at the State Department, and they rolled out their Religious Freedom Report. And I'll tell you what, the main focus was deteriorating conditions around the world for religious freedom. And just a few weeks before, USERF had rolled out their report, again with the same theme, which is religious freedom continues to decline. You can change the next one. So, looking at measuring religious freedom around the world, I really feel like USERF is the best measure simply because they look at religious freedom single focused. They don't consider bilateral relationships or any other reason that often interferes with the State Department's view of a country being a particular concern. So really, and USERF focuses, and these are the 28 countries that they either put as a country of particular concern or on the special watch list. So the State Department's the one that actually designates that, but USERF makes recommendations. And I feel like most people agree that they're more right on just because they're only looking at religious freedom, that they're more accurate. So according to the International Religious Freedom Act of 1998, or IRFA, countries that engage in or tolerate systematic, ongoing, or egregious violations should be designated as a country of particular concern, or a CPC. And under the Frank R. Wolf International Religious Freedom Act of 2016, the special watch list was created for those that engage in or tolerate severe violations of religious freedom but don't quite meet the CPC status. Now in 2019, we started keeping track when I was first joined the Commission. The first line of every report shows the trajectory of each country. And so if you can switch to the next slide. This is the last 5 reports that USERF has reported. You can take a look. Only 3 countries had improvements this year out of 28. And by contrast, it had the highest amount of countries that are deteriorating at 14. Now today I'm really only going to, I shouldn't say only, but I'm trying to put South Asia in context of what we're seeing globally. And so I'm only really looking at those 8 countries we consider South Asia, not so much Southeast Asia. Now you can change to the next slide. This is South Asia for the last 5 years. Kind of scary. Each country, there's 8 countries that most people consider to be strictly South Asia, so obviously only half of those are on the USERF's recommendations. But as you can see, there hasn't been any improvement for these countries. In fact, they're deteriorating, which is a stunning picture. And as you can see, Afghanistan continues to deteriorate, India continues to worsen, Pakistan continues to deteriorate, Sri Lanka continued on a worrying trajectory. And so Sri Lanka was added this year for the first time by USERF as a special watch list country. You can go to the next slide. So if you read the news in the United States, you might think that religion, we're becoming less religious, right? There's so much news about the nuns and people that are unaffiliated and less people going to church. But the opposite is actually true around the world. The world is becoming more religious. And my question is, are diplomats and policymakers ready for this? As you can see, religion is very important to the people in Africa, Middle East, South Asia, and Latin America. But it's really important that we understand that bad actors are using religious communities and manipulating them to divide communities. Obviously, religious communities make really terrific citizens, and we have so much data that proves that. But what we're seeing is bad actors taking advantage of religiosity to try to turn communities against each other, and that's where the danger comes in for these areas. Now you can change it to the next slide. Look at this slide with the religiosity with the USERF countries. And it's really stunning because USERF countries are basically made up of 2 types of countries. Those who report religion as highly important to them, and those who report religion as not important to them, but are former or current communist countries. So, I mean, I think it's interesting that those countries just raise a level up when it comes to religious violations. So, usurp countries that reported religion as very important in their lives had governments that tended to engage in or tolerate religious freedom violations targeting religious minority communities, those outside the majority of religion, and that's what we're seeing in South Asia. Usurp countries with low religiosity tended to be hostile to all religions, like China. Only one CPC or special watch list country didn't fit that, and that was Tajikistan. It was rated as moderate. But there are several countries that Pew Research that did these studies wasn't able to survey, but most of them really do still fit with the countries around them. You can change it to the next one. Now I'm going to look at measures for South Asia, including the religiosity of each country, and also the Pew Research Center indexes for government restrictions and social hostilities based on religious activities. At least half are very religious, and of course there's no data for it, but we know a lot of the ones aren't listed, like Sri Lanka is very religious. All have high government restrictions on religion. 6 have high to very high social hostilities based on religion, and half are identified by usurp as having severe religious freedom violations. When there are high government restrictions and high societal hostilities, we are seeing governments enforce discriminatory laws for perpetrating a culture of impunity against religious minority communities. You can change to the next slide. Mob violence also often follows those who are even falsely accused of breaking religious laws. It creates a culture of violence with those outside the majority religion paying the biggest price, but really all of society suffers. Let's face it, most people want security and safety and prosperity for their families and their communities. And so in no way am I suggesting that the people in these countries want these conditions, but there are bad actors that are using religion to try to divide people to create these conditions so they can continue to rule and have influence. In India, government at the national, state, and local level promote and enforce religiously discriminatory policies. These include anti-conversion laws, laws on interfaith relationships, the wearing of hijabs, and laws against cow slaughter. The national government uses the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, or the UAPA, and the Sedition Act, as you heard Dr. Chima mention earlier, to suppress critical voices and to target religious minority communities. We are seeing violent attacks and destruction of property, including houses of worship, in particular in Muslim and Christian neighborhoods. Social media platforms continue to facilitate violence, widespread disinformation, hate speech, and incitement of violence against religious communities. In February 2022, Twitter removed a caricature shared by the verified BJP account of Gujarat depicting Muslim men hung by a noose. Unbelievable. Of course, the hate speech and threats of violence and the attacks against the Sikhs are beyond troubling in India. In Pakistan, religious minorities are subject to frequent attacks and threats, including accusations of blasphemy, targeted killings, lynchings, mob violence, forced conversions, sexual violence against women and girls, and desecration of houses of worship and cemeteries. Harsh and discriminatory legislation such as blasphemy laws and anti-Ahmadiyya laws, as well as increasingly aggressive societal discrimination, has enabled and encouraged radical Islamists to operate with impunity against anyone not in the religious minority, including Hindus, Christians, Sikhs, Shias, and Ahmadis. Just yesterday, an Ahmadiyya told me that their community is targeted each day for practicing their faith in their own homes or reading the Quran. In Sri Lanka, the government targets the rights of religious minorities, particularly Muslims and Hindus, using problematic legislation to discriminate against them, even in instigating land disputes to expropriate their property. The 1979 Prevention of Terrorism Act, or the PTA, gives authorities broad power to search, arrest, and detain individuals, which they use to target Muslims. The government harasses and imprisons religious actors if they're involved in any protests. So it's important to know the context, because you can't blame this on religion or one religion. Because the religions themselves are not the perpetrators. It's really bad actors in government taking advantage of the religious communities to cause these conditions. But just looking at these 3 countries alone, in India, Hindu nationalists are the ones working with the government to target Muslims, Christians, Sikhs, and other minorities, along with the BJP-led government. In Pakistan, it's Sunni Muslims working with the government to target Hindus, Christians, Sikhs, Shias, and Ahmadis. In Sri Lanka, it's Buddhists and are the majority that are working, again, with bad actors in the government to do this. So divide and conquer has long been a tool of authoritarian governments. Unfortunately, we're also seeing it in democracies as well. And you can go to the next one. As population continues to increase, we're seeing it increase more in highly privileged countries. See that half of the top 10 countries projected in 2050 will be in Asia, 4 in South Asia. And they're high to very high in religiosity, government restrictions, and social hostilities. So you can go to the next slide. It is important to understand that these problems are not going away on their own. If anything, they may become more complicated. Keeping the status quo is impossible. If it's not interrupted, deteriorating conditions will likely lead to mass violence. It is in the best interest of the United States and the global community to press for improved religious freedom conditions, which is the only way for a peaceful and stable future. Now you can go to the next slide, which is my final slide. So after years of elevating the importance of religious freedom globally, conditions are still continuing to deteriorate. Calling out countries is not enough. What USCIRF and others do to document religious freedom violations is necessary but not sufficient. The U.S. officials, are U.S. officials ready for an increasingly religious world? We need diplomats with training in cross-cultural literacy ready to meet that challenge. At USCIRF, we recommended that the U.S. enter into a binding agreement with the Pakistani government to encourage substantial steps to address these horrific religious freedom violations that we're seeing. This agreement could include releasing blasphemy prisoners, repealing blasphemy laws, or at least make them a bailable offense, removing religion or ID documents, and other actions. There are many guidelines that could use this kind of aggressive diplomacy to future U.S. support. We need to encourage and support civil society to work cooperatively with governments to help guide them to improve their conditions. I worked with one government to implement a list of actions, really low-hanging fruit they could do to improve religious freedom conditions. And you know what? They did almost everything on that list. An official in another government is supporting in-country roundtables because they understand the need to socialize communities with each other if they're going to improve conditions, if they're going to be able to even change laws without having any sort of disruptions in their community. It's important to support in-country religious freedom roundtables and local civil society programs if we're going to move society beyond tolerance to accepting one another with deep theological differences. So this is the only way forward for lasting peace. And so as we look at foreign policy, oftentimes religious freedom has been siloed to the side with these religious freedom conventions, and we talk to each other, and the people making foreign policy aren't hearing about it. And it really has to be integrated in foreign policy because we can't have a lasting peace without having human rights and religious freedom be at the big boy table with all of the discussions about what policy should look like. So I think in South Asia there's no way forward if we don't include human rights and religious freedom as part of the discussion. So thanks so much for having me today. I hope this was helpful.
Thank you, Nadine. We're coming close to the end of our time, but I've been asked to offer the floor again to Dr. Chima for some closing remarks.
Ladies and gentlemen, obviously I wear many hats, and now it's a privilege for me before we close. But before we do so, let me thank you all for your wonderful presence here today. It wasn't easy. When we arranged any congressional briefing, I think we started preparing for it in December last year, for this to make happen in June. As I always say, talking about religious freedom, human rights is not an easy thing. Not in the UN, not in the Congress or the British Parliament. It's always complicated because you can sell the commercial-friendly human rights, which doesn't hurt anybody. When it comes to perpetrator of violence or the people who commit genocide or violate religious freedom or the hate speech, these are the topics which are hard to engage with. So thank you very much for all of you, all the congressional offices who helped us to organize this. And I think Alice is there, she's hearing. She just texted me, I can still hear you, don't cut me off. So Alice, thank you very much for your presence. I hope we will have Undersecretary soon again to the Congress at some point. Also our champion, Nyanza. So I'm really impressed by these two women. Excellent work. Undersecretary General Alice Levito and Nyanza. it's very easy for people like us to dress up very posh and stand on the podium in the Congress, but it's very hard to go to those areas like where ISIS was once operating, like Nadine, go to all these troubled areas in the Middle East and work with these persecuted religious minorities. So our compliment to you for joining us. Our dear colleague here, who has been running around throughout the congressional offices, he must have burnt a lot of calories during the last few days preparing this. And obviously, our friend Pat Main, who was our co-chair, and our current co-chairs to organize this. We'll have more of it, but we need your support. And I know that it was very difficult to get in today because there is a VVIP, a Prime Minister of a country visiting the Congress on the same day. So thank you very much for your kind presence, and we'll keep you posted about certain events in the future. Thank you all.
ਹਾਂਜੀ, ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ, ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ। ਅੱਜ ਅਸੀਂ ਇੱਥੇ ਕੈਪੀਟਲ ਹਿੱਲ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਯੂਨਾਈਟਿਡ ਸਟੇਟਸ ਕਾਂਗਰਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਬਰੀਫਿੰਗ ਸੀਗੀ ਮੈਜੋਰਿਟਰੀਜ਼ਮ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ, ਖਾਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਸਾਊਥ ਏਸ਼ੀਆ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ, ਉਹਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਹੀ ਚੰਗੇ ਬੁਲਾਰੇ ਯੂਨਾਈਟਿਡ ਨੇਸ਼ਨਸ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੋਂ ਔਰ ਯੂਸਰਫ ਤੋਂ ਆਏ ਸੀ, ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕੰਟਰੀ ਆਫ ਕੰਸਰਨ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ ਪਿਛਲੇ ਕੁਝ ਸਾਲਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, ਖਾਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਇੰਡੀਆ, ਪਾਕਿਸਤਾਨ, ਸਾਊਥ ਈਸਟ ਏਸ਼ੀਆ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, ਉੱਥੇ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੀ ਹਾਲਤ ਆ, ਖਾਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਰਿਲੀਜੀਅਸ ਫਰੀडम ਦੇ ਨਜ਼ਰੀਏ ਤੋਂ ਉਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਵਿਚਾਰ ਹੋਈ ਆ ਔਰ ਰეკਮੈਂਡੇਸ਼ਨਸ ਹੋਈਆਂ ਨੇ। ਔਰ ਸਿੱਖ ਕਾਕਸ ਕਮੇਟੀ ਵੱਲੋਂ, ਸਿੱਖ ਕਾਕਸ ਦੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਕਮੇਟੀ ਆ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਕਿ ਆਰਗੇਨਾਈਜ਼ ਨੇ ਕੀਤਾ ਇਹ, ਉਹਦੇ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਇਹ ਇੱਕ ਉਪਰਾਲਾ ਕੀਤਾ ਗਿਆ ਤਾਂ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਯੂਨਾਈਟਿਡ ਸਟੇਟਸ ਕਾਂਗਰਸਮੈਨ ਨੇ ਜਾਂ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਕਾਂਗਰਸ ਆ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸਿੱਖ ਕੌਮ ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਨਜ਼ਰੀਆ ਆ, ਪਰਸਪੈਕਟਿਵ ਆ, ਉਹ ਇੱਥੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹਾਲਸ ਆਫ ਪਾਵਰ ਨੇ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਲਿਆ ਕੇ ਰੱਖਿਆ ਜਾਵੇ। ਔਰ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਵੀ ਕਿਸੇ ਮਿਨੋਰਿਟੀ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ, ਡਜ਼ਨਟ ਮੈਟਰ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਸਿੱਖ ਨੇ ਜਾਂ ਕੋਈ ਦਲਿਤ ਨੇ ਜਾਂ ਉਹ ਕ੍ਰਿਸਚਨਸ ਨੇ, ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਵੀ ਧੱਕਾ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਆ, ਉਹਦੇ ਖਿਲਾਫ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਆ ਆਵਾਜ਼ ਮੌਕੇ 'ਤੇ ਚੁੱਕੀ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਰਹੀ ਆ। ਔਰ ਇਹ ਉਸੇ ਹੀ ਐਫਰਟ ਦਾ ਇੱਕ ਪਾਰਟ ਆ। ਮੈਂ ਸਮਝਦਾ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਇਸ ਕਿਸਮ ਦੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਐਕਟੀਵਿਟੀ ਆ, ਜਿਹੜੀ ਇਸ ਕਿਸਮ ਦੀ ਐਕਟਿਵਿਜ਼ਮ ਆ ਕਹਿ ਲਓ, ਜਾਂ ਇਸ ਕਿਸਮ ਦੀਆਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਕਾਨਫਰੰਸਿਸ ਨੇ ਜਾਂ ਬਰੀਫਿੰਗਸ ਨੇ, ਖਾਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਉਸ ਥਾਂ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਕਿ ਬਹੁਤ ਹੀ ਮਹੱਤਵਪੂਰਨ ਥਾਂ ਆ ਔਰ ਦੁਨੀਆ ਦੀ ਇੱਕ ਤਾਕਤ ਆ ਸਭ ਤੋਂ ਵੱਡੀ, ਜਿਹਦੀ ਸੈਂਟਰਲ ਪਾਵਰ ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਜਗ੍ਹਾ ਹੈ ਇਹ, ਔਰ ਉੱਥੋਂ ਇਹੋ ਜਿਹੀ ਗੱਲ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਆ ਬੈਠ ਕੇ ਕਰਨੀ ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਔਰ ਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਦੇ ਨਜ਼ਰੀਏ ਤੋਂ, ਮੇਰਾ ਖਿਆਲ 'ਚ ਉਹ ਬਹੁਤ ਇੰਪੋਰਟੈਂਟ ਆ। ਗੁਰੂ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਨੇ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਸਰਬੱਤ ਦੇ ਭਲੇ ਦੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਬਖਸ਼ਿਸ਼ ਕੀਤੀ ਆ, ਸੋ ਇਹ ਉਹਦੀ ਇੱਕ ਐਕਸਟੈਂਸ਼ਨ ਆ। ਅਸੀਂ ਥੋੜ੍ਹੀ ਬਹੁਤੀ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਪਣਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹਿੱਸਾ ਆ ਉਹ ਪਾ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ। ਸੋ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਉਮੀਦ ਆ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਸਾਡੀ ਇਸ ਕਿਸਮ ਦੀਆਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਕੋਸ਼ਿਸ਼ਾਂ ਨੇ ਉਹਦਾ ਫਲ ਲੱਗੇਗਾ ਔਰ ਦੁਨੀਆ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੇਟਰੇਡ ਆ ਜਾਂ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਧੱਕੇ ਨੇ ਜਾਂ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਖਾਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਧਾਰਮਿਕ ਆਜ਼ਾਦੀ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹਮਲੇ ਨੇ, ਖਾਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਸਾਊਥ ਏਸ਼ੀਆ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਉਹਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਮਹਾਰਾਜ ਕਿਰਪਾ ਕਰੇ ਆਉਣ ਵਾਲੇ ਸਮੇਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਉੱਥੇ ਪਰਪੀਟਰੇਟਰਸ ਨੇ, ਜਿਹੜਾ ਇਹ ਕੰਮ ਕਰਦੇ ਨੇ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਇਸ ਗੱਲ ਦੇ ਕੰਨ ਹੋ ਜਾਣ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਕੋਈ ਵੀ ਇਹੋ ਜਿਹਾ ਕੰਮ ਕਰਨ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਸੋਚਣ। ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ, ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ।
ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ, ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ। ਅੱਜ ਕੈਪੀਟਲ ਹਿੱਲ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਇੱਕ ਬਰੀਫਿੰਗ ਹੋਈ ਜਿਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਯੂਨਾਈਟਿਡ ਨੇਸ਼ਨਸ ਦੀ ਅੰਡਰ ਸੈਕਟਰੀ, USF ਦੀ ਸਾਬਕਾ ਚੇਅਰਪਰਸਨ और US Congressional Sikh Caucus ਦੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਮੀਨੈਂਟ ਕਾਂਗਰਸਮੈਨ ਔਰ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਇਕਤਦਾਰ ਕਰਾਮਤ ਚੀਮਾ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਿ ਹਿਊਮਨ ਰਾਈਟਸ ਦੇ ਸਟੀਅਰਿੰਗ ਕਮੇਟੀ ਦੇ ਮੈਂਬਰ ਨੇ ਯੂਨਾਈਟਿਡ ਨੇਸ਼ਨਸ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਪਾਰਟਿਸਿਪੇਟ ਕੀਤਾ। ਸਿੱਖ ਰਿਪਰੈਜ਼ੈਂਟੇਟਿਵਸ ਵੀ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਦੀਆਂ ਅੱਡ-ਅੱਡ ਥਾਵਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਆਏ ਹੋਏ ਸੀ ਔਰ ਇਸ ਦੀ ਟਾਈਮਿੰਗ ਇਸ ਢੰਗ ਨਾਲ ਹੀ ਚੁਣੀ ਗਈ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਇਹ ਉਹ ਦਿਨ ਚੱਲ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ ਜਦੋਂ ਕਿ 39 ਸਾਲ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਭਾਰਤੀ ਹਕੂਮਤ ਨੇ ਟੈਂਕਾਂ ਤੋਪਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ ਤਖਤ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਤੇ 37 ਹੋਰ ਇਤਿਹਾਸਕ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰਿਆਂ ਤੇ ਹਮਲਾ ਕੀਤਾ ਸੀ। ਔਰ ਇਸ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਹੀ 22 ਜੂਨ ਨੂੰ ਮੋਦੀ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕਿ ਵਾਈਟ ਹਾਊਸ ਦੇ ਸਪੈਸ਼ਲ ਸੱਦੇ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਆ ਰਿਹਾ, ਸਟੇਟ ਡਿਨਰ ਹੈ ਔਰ ਉਸ ਨੇ ਅਮਰੀਕਨ ਕਾਂਗਰਸ ਔਰ ਸੈਨੇਟ ਦੋਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਜੁਆਇੰਟ ਹਾਊਸ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਐਡਰੈਸ ਕਰਨਾ, ਉਹਨੂੰ ਇਨਵਾਈਟ ਕੀਤਾ ਗਿਆ। ਸੋ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਸ ਗੱਲ ਨੂੰ ਯਕੀਨੀ ਬਣਾਉਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਜਿਵੇਂ ਮੋਦੀ ਦੀ ਪਿਛਲੀ ਵਿਜ਼ਿਟ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਵੀ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਕਾਂਗਰਸਮੈਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਓਪਨ ਲੈਟਰ ਲਿਖਿਆ ਸੀ, ਬਰੀਫਿੰਗ ਹੋਈ ਸੀ, ਅੱਜ ਦਾ ਟੌਪਿਕ ਵੀ ਮੈਜੋਰੀਟੇਰੀਅਨਿਜ਼ਮ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਮੈਜੋਰਿਟੀ ਦਾ ਜਦੋਂ ਰੂਲ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਉਹ ਵਰਸ ਦੈਨ ਦਾ ਡਿਕਟੇਟਰਸ਼ਿਪ ਹੁੰਦਾ। ਔਰ ਅੱਜ ਬੜੀ ਇਹ ਸਫਲ ਹੀਅਰਿੰਗ ਰਹੀ, ਬੜੀ ਖੁੱਲ੍ਹ ਕੇ ਕਾਂਗਰਸਮੈਨ ਜਿਮ ਕੋਸਟਾ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਿ ਸਟਾਕਟਨ ਨੂੰ ਰਿਪਰੈਜ਼ੈਂਟ ਕਰਦੇ ਨੇ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਐਕਸਪੀਰੀਅੰਸ ਵੀ ਦੱਸੇ ਔਰ ਇਸੇ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਅੱਡ ਸਪੀਕਰ ਸਨ UN ਦੀ ਅੰਡਰ ਸੈਕਟਰੀ ਨੇ ਵੀ ਇਸ ਗੱਲ ਨੂੰ ਯਕੀਨੀ ਬਣਾਉਣ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਕੀਤੀ ਕਿ ਦੁਨੀਆ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਉਹ ਮਾਹੌਲ ਹੋਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਹੈ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਕਿ ਕੋਈ ਰਿਲੀਜੀਅਸ ਪਰਸੀਕਿਊਸ਼ਨ ਨਾ ਹੋਏ। ਸੋ ਅਸੀਂ US ਕੰਗਰੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਸਿੱਖ ਕਾਕਸ ਔਰ ਖਾਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਕਮੇਟੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਕਿ ਫਰੈਂਡਸ ਆਫ US ਕੰਗਰੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਸਿੱਖ ਕਾਕਸ ਦੇ ਥੱਲੇ ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨੇ ਇਸ ਇਵੈਂਟ ਨੂੰ ਆਰਗੇਨਾਈਜ਼ ਕੀਤਾ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਬਹੁਤ-ਬਹੁਤ ਮੁਬਾਰਕਬਾਦ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਹਾਂ।
ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ। ਪ੍ਰਿਤਪਾਲ ਸਿੰਘ ਡਾਇਰੈਕਟਰ ਅਮਰੀਕਨ ਸਿੱਖ ਕਾਕਸ ਕਮੇਟੀ ਅੱਜ ਕੈਪੀਟਲ 'ਤੇ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹਿੰਦੁਸਤਾਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਖਾਸ ਤੌਰ 'ਤੇ ਅਤੇ ਸਾਊਥ ਏਸ਼ੀਅਨ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕੰਟਰੀਜ਼ ਹੈ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਉੱਪਰ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਬਹੁਤ ਸੰਮਤੀ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਗਿਣਤੀ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀਜ਼ ਨੇ ਉਹ ਛੋਟੀਆਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀਜ਼ ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ 'ਤੇ ਕਿੱਦਾਂ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਪਾਉਂਦੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਬਾਰੇ ਖੁੱਲ੍ਹ ਕੇ ਵਿਚਾਰ ਹੋਈ। ਅੰਡਰ ਸੈਕਟਰੀ ਜਨਰਲ UN ਦੇ ਜੇ ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਬੋਲੇ ਸੀ। ਫਿਰ ਨਾਡੀਨ ਮਿਆਂਜ਼ਾ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਿ ਇੰਟਰਨੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਰਿਲੀਜੀਅਸ ਫਰੀਡਮ ਦੇ ਡਾਇਰੈਕਟਰ ਨੇ ਇੰਚਾਰਜ ਨੇ ਉਹ ਬੋਲੇ ਅਤੇ ਨਾਲ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਇਕਤਦਾਰ ਚੀਮਾ ਅਤੇ ਕੰਗਰੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਆਫਿਸ ਤੋਂ ਜੋ ਸਾਡੇ ਕਾਕਸ ਦੇ ਕੋ ਚੇਅਰ ਨੇ ਡੇਵਿਡ ਵੈਲਾਡੇਓ ਅਤੇ ਸੀਨੀਅਰ ਮੈਂਬਰ ਜਿਮ ਕੋਸਟਾ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਆ ਕੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਵਿਚਾਰ ਪ੍ਰਗਟ ਕੀਤੇ। ਅਸੀਂ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਦੇ ਧੰਨਵਾਦੀ ਹਾਂ ਉੱਥੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਸਾਰੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਆਫਿਸਰਸ ਬਾਹਰੋਂ ਆਏ ਸੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਸਟਾਫਰ ਆਏ ਸੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਵੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਧੰਨਵਾਦ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਸਾਊਥ ਏਸ਼ੀਅਨ ਰੀਜਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਮਾਈਨੋਰਟੀਜ਼ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਜੋ ਧੱਕਾ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਹਾਈਲਾਈਟ ਕੀਤਾ। ਇਹਨਾਂ ਸ਼ਬਦਾਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ।
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. My name's Gurneil Singh Boparai. I'm the City Planning Commissioner in the City of Stockton. Today here I'm on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. I've just attended a hearing hosted by the Sikh Caucus Congressional Committee here, and it was a very successful event. We had Congressman David Valadeo here and Congressman Jim Costa. We also had Dr. Iqbal Chima and representatives from the State Department, as well as the UN Under Secretary General, which is basically the second in charge at the United Nations, all speaking about the issue of majoritism in India, in Pakistan, in China, and how that is affecting minorities in those nations in terms of their human rights. It was a very holistic event. I applaud all the panelists for doing a great job in highlighting the violence that minorities have faced in China, Pakistan, and India, especially considering Prime Minister Modi's visit coming next week to Capitol Hill. I applaud Congressman Jim Costa and Congressman David Valadeo for taking up the issue and pledging to bring up this issue to Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And my pledge is to the entire Panth to make sure that you call your Congress members before Prime Minister Modi comes to DC next week and urge them to carry these issues of human right violations in these nations, including India, to the Prime Minister Modi when they meet him here at Capitol Hill next week. Thank you so much. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Yeah, when we first recommended that India be a country of particular concern, it got all sorts of press, and the U.S. government was surprised, and we started having meetings with them. And while the U.S. government is still not designated India as a country of particular concern, they certainly have, I think, understood why USRF made those recommendations and are watching closely the violence that's going on in the country. And in the past several years, India continues to deteriorate, so it's continuing to get worse. So I've been told that the U.S. government officials at the highest level have communicated about the conditions with the Indian government, so I'm hopeful that there's diplomacy happening on behind the scenes, and a lot of times we don't get to see that. But it's still a disappointment that the State Department has not yet designated India. We know new designations will come out in the fall. We're hopeful that at that point in time, the U.S. will make the right decision and acknowledge the crimes that are happening in India by putting India on that country of particular concern list.
Especially when PM Modi is coming and he's getting like warm welcome. Second time he will be addressing Joint House of Congress. So do you guys plan on something doing that, or can you do something about the issues which we have already discussed today?
There's quite a few events that will be happening in the next few weeks with Modi coming into the United States that will be focusing on the religious freedom conditions and the atrocities that are being allowed with impunity in the country. I know I'm speaking at a few of them, so certainly there's plenty of information out there about what's happening. But Prime Minister Modi being on Capitol Hill, him being with the president, I'm hopeful that these are all opportunities for conversations about what's happening in India. I'm hoping members of Congress bring this up to him. I'm hoping the president himself brings up his concern with what's happening in the Secretary of State. So these are opportunities, hopefully, for the United States to make it clear that this isn't acceptable. We don't always get to see what happens behind closed doors, but we're hoping that there'll be some strong diplomacy. It would be unacceptable for him to come and be celebrated and to these crimes to be ignored. The victims deserve to be heard.
ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ ਅੱਜ ਅਸੀਂ ਕੈਪੀਟਲ ਹਿੱਲ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਔਰ ਖਾਸ ਤੌਰ 'ਤੇ US ਪਾਰਲੀਮੈਂਟ ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਮੇਨ ਕੈਪੀਟਲ ਹਿੱਲ ਹੈ ਉੱਥੇ ਅੱਜ ਇੱਕ ਕੰਗਰੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਬਰੀਫਿੰਗ ਕੀਤੀ ਜਿਹਦਾ ਟੌਪਿਕ ਸੀਗਾ ਇੰਪੈਕਟ ਆਫ ਮੈਜੋਰੀਟੇਰੀਅਨਿਜ਼ਮ ਔਨ ਰਿਲੀਜੀਅਸ ਮਾਈਨੋਰਿਟੀਜ਼ ਇਨ ਸਾਊਥ ਏਸ਼ੀਆ। ਸਾਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਭਾਰਤ ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਪ੍ਰਧਾਨ ਮੰਤਰੀ ਨਰਿੰਦਰ ਮੋਦੀ ਹੁਣ ਇੱਥੇ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਫੇਰੀ 'ਤੇ ਆ ਰਿਹਾ ਅਤੇ ਇੱਥੇ ਕਾਂਗਰਸ 'ਚ ਵੀ ਉਹ ਆਏਗਾ। ਸੋ ਅਸੀਂ ਕੋਸ਼ਿਸ਼ ਕੀਤੀ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਮੈਂਬਰਸ ਆਫ ਕਾਂਗਰਸ ਨੇ ਜਿੰਨੇ ਵੀ ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਇਸ ਵੇਲੇ ਭਾਰਤ 'ਚ ਧਾਰਮਿਕ ਆਜ਼ਾਦੀ ਦੀ ਉਲੰਘਣਾ ਹੋ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ ਔਰ ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹਿਊਮਨ ਰਾਈਟਸ ਵਾਇਲੇਸ਼ਨ ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਵਾਲੇ ਪਾਸੇ ਧਿਆਨ ਦਿਵਾਇਆ ਜਾਏ। ਜਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਪ੍ਰਾਈਮ ਮਿਨਿਸਟਰ ਮੋਦੀ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਵੀ ਇੱਕ ਵਾਰੀ ਕਾਂਗਰਸ 'ਚ ਆਏ ਸੀ ਉਸ ਸਮੇਂ ਵੀ ਟੌਮ ਲੈਂਡਸ ਹਿਊਮਨ ਰਾਈਟਸ ਕਮਿਸ਼ਨ ਨਾਲ ਰਲ ਕੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਇੱਕ ਕਾਂਗਰੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਹੀਅਰਿੰਗ ਕਰਵਾਈ ਸੀ ਔਰ 36 ਕਾਂਗਰਸਮੈਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਉਸ ਸਮੇਂ 36 ਕਾਂਗਰਸਮੈਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਇੱਕ ਚਿੱਠੀ ਉਸ ਵਕਤ ਦੇ ਸਪੀਕਰ ਪੌਲ ਰॉय ਨੂੰ ਲਿਖੀ ਸੀ। ਉਹਦਾ ਇੰਪੈਕਟ ਇਹ ਹੋਇਆ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਜਦੋਂ ਨਰਿੰਦਰ ਮੋਦੀ ਵਾਪਸ ਗਿਆ ਭਾਰਤ ਅਤੇ ਉਹਨੇ RSS ਨੂੰ ਖੁੱਲ੍ਹੀ ਤੌਰ 'ਤੇ ਮਨਾ ਕੀਤਾ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਰਿਲੀਜੀਅਸ ਮਾਈਨੋਰਟੀਜ਼ ਦੇ ਖਿਲਾਫ ਵਾਇਲੈਂਸ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਰੋਕਿਆ ਜਾਏ। ਸੋ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਆਸ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਅੱਜ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਕਾਂਗਰੈਸ਼ਨਲ ਬਰੀਫਿੰਗ ਹੈ ਇੱਕ ਤਾਂ ਇਹ ਕੌਮ ਦੇ ਦਰਬਾਰ ਸਾਹਿਬ 'ਤੇ ਹਮਲੇ ਦਾ ਵੀ ਜੂਨ ਔਰ ਸ਼ਹੀਦੀਆਂ ਦਾ ਇਹ ਵੀਕ ਹੈ ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਇੰਟਰਨੈਸ਼ਨਲੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਇਸ ਵੇਲੇ ਭਾਰਤ 'ਚ ਸਿਚੁਏਸ਼ਨ ਬਣੀ ਹੋਈ ਹੈ ਮਾਈਨੋਰਟੀਜ਼ ਦੀ ਉਸ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਮੈਂਬਰ ਆਫ ਕਾਂਗਰਸ ਹੈ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਬਰੀਫ ਕਰੀਏ ਔਰ ਸੁਚੱਜੇ ਢੰਗ ਨਾਲ ਕੋਈ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਰਿਕਮੈਂਡੇਸ਼ਨ ਦਈਏ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਕੀ ਆਸ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਬਹੁਤ ਵਾਰੀ ਬਹੁਤ ਸਾਰਾ ਕੰਮ ਕਰਨੇ ਆ ਸਾਡੀ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀਆਂ ਮੁਜ਼ਾਹਰੇ ਵੀ ਕਰਦੀਆਂ ਪਰ ਇਸ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਇਹ ਵੀ ਜ਼ਰੂਰੀ ਆ ਵੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਹਾਊਸਿਸ ਵਿੱਚ ਲੌਬਿੰਗ ਕਰੀਏ ਔਰ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਦੱਸੀਏ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਮੈਂਬਰ ਨੇ ਕਾਂਗਰਸ ਦੇ ਜਾਂ US ਸੈਨੇਟ ਦੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਕੋਲ ਸਾਡੀਆਂ ਮੰਗਾਂ ਕੀ ਨੇ। ਸੋ ਅਸਾਂ ਆਪਣੀਆਂ ਕਲੀਅਰ ਮੰਗਾਂ ਰਿਕਮੈਂਡੇਸ਼ਨ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਸਾਹਮਣੇ ਰੱਖੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਔਰ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਆਸ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਆਉਣ ਵਾਲੇ ਸਮੇਂ 'ਚ ਇੱਥੇ ਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਲਾਅ ਮੇਕਰਸ ਨੇ ਉਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਗੌਰ ਕਰਨਗੇ। ਇਸ ਤੋਂ ਵੱਖ ਇਹ ਆ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸਿੱਖ ਕੌਮ ਦੀ ਜੈਨੋਸਾਈਡ ਆ ਉਹਦੇ 4 ਸਟੇਟਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਮਤੇ ਪਾਸ ਕਰਾਏ ਆ। ਅਸੀਂ ਅੱਜ ਕਾਂਗਰਸਮੈਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਫਿਰ ਯਾਦ ਦਿਵਾਇਆ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਆਸ ਰੱਖਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਆਉਣ ਵਾਲੇ ਸਮੇਂ 'ਚ US ਕਾਂਗਰਸ ਵੀ ਸਿੱਖ ਜੈਨੋਸਾਈਡ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈ ਮਤਾ ਪਾਸ ਕਰੇਗੀ। ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ।